This is A Geek Leader. Hey, Geek Leaders. Welcome to episode 119 of A Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. And what I want you to do is to pause the show in just a second and go to Twitter and follow me at John Rauda, JOHNROUDA, and send out a tweet of your favorite episode, your favorite whatever, and tag me in it so that I can get some feedback about what you guys like to hear and what you don't like to hear, and that would help me out and help me help cultivate this show a little bit better. All right, so today our guest on the show is the president of University of West Florida, Dr. Martha Saunders. So let me tell you a little bit about how why she's on the show. So the University of Western Florida has one of the best cybersecurity programs that's out there. And we've had a lot of people ask on the show, how do I get a career in cybersecurity? And I thought she would be a fantastic guest to talk a little bit about, their College of Science and Engineering and some of the things that she's done. She's been in leadership in the academics at the University of Florida, Georgia, Wisconsin, and now the president of the University of West Florida. Many different awards. She helped establish the Innovation Institute, the Center for Cybersecurity, and the Office of Equity and Diversity. So she has a fantastic career, has lots of great insight, and I love this conversation with Dr. Saunders. So with all that being said, give it up for President Martha Saunders.
Thank you.
So I want to set some context. If you don't mind telling the audience kind of like how you got to where you are and why you chose the academic route.
As a university president, like a lot of us, I just it happened. It was never a plan. When I finished my undergraduate, they didn't make women presidents of anything.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that too, about the women leadership roles and kind of how that's changed over the years. I know actually the school that I went to was an all-girls school up until like the late 70s.
Yeah. Well, there were not a lot of opportunities, and that the women's movement was new. I'm dating myself right now, but it was, and we fought the fight, and so women have emerged into leadership. We still don't have them at top leadership in the numbers that we have them in the labor ranks, but the times are changing, and I think they're changing for the better for everybody.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. They're definitely changing and changing a lot. So when you started your career, did you plan on going into teaching from an undergraduate perspective, or? No,
I didn't. Actually, I thought that was like the last thing I wanted to do. And I came into higher ed rather late in the game. I started out, my very first job was with an ad agency in Baltimore, and then I had spent a whole decade having babies, and did that. And when my children got to a point where I felt like it was okay to resume a career, I went back, did a lot of freelance work, and was invited to teach part-time in a brand new high school. They wanted me to set up a communication program, which I did, and realized that teaching kind of turned me on. And so that evolved into adjunct work at a couple of colleges. And then, like I said, rather late in the game, I came into a university. I came up the ranks. I was an instructor, an assistant professor, up to professor, and then moved into administration and was a dean, and then kept going. So this is my third presidency.
Wow. So
sort of failed it. I'm a recovering president.
Gotcha. So do you ever miss being in the classroom?
All the time, but I still teach.
Oh yeah.
I teach. I'm teaching this fall. And of course, and the irony is, I was on the first task force at our university when this whole idea of distance learning, or what we now call online learning, it was just all so new, and we were just scratching our heads, wondering what is this going to mean to higher ed, and clearly it meant a lot. But the course that I'm teaching now is going to be a hybrid course. It will be face-to-face, it will be synchronous video, and it will be online.
Awesome. Yeah,
So,
I teach.
and I've had to learn all this.
Yeah, I totally get that. I teach part-time at two schools, Winthrop University, which is in the classroom. I actually go in 1 day a week, and we teach there. But I also teach cybersecurity at York Technical College, and that's all done distance learning. And that's having to learn the software that goes along with it and how to control that. It's very, very interesting. I remember, this may date me a little bit too, the first distance ed class that I ever took was an accounting class, and I had to drive to the school and pick up a box of VHS tapes.
Oh, no.
And go home and watch the tapes and then drive back to the school and take the test at the testing center. It was kind of an interesting thing there.
And really, a lot of that's evolved from the old correspondence course.
Mm-hmm.
But we've gotten a whole lot better at it. But I will say, for having been a classroom teacher for so many years, and then I have taken, the Quality Matters certification. I'm trying to set all the right examples for my faculty. And you use a whole different set of muscles teaching online than you do teaching face-to-face.
Absolutely.
You don't have the nonverbals. You can't read who's looking confused because you can't see them. And you have to keep students engaged in a very different way than if you're teaching face-to-face. Of course, you know that from doing both.
Yeah. It's. I noticed also I have a much higher success rate in my face-to-face classes than I do my online classes, and I think that's partly because of that. If I see someone's confused, I can change the message and I can adjust to them. But when it's online, I'm not really seeing the response, because a lot of people are afraid to post back, "Hey, I'm totally lost about what's going on here." They'll just assume that I can just read it later and figure it out.
Although I have noticed that students who would not ask a question in class because they don't want to prolong the class and have everybody mad at them, they don't mind asking online. And so, or they'll send me a private message. And I felt like in some ways they're more engaged in asking questions than sometimes they are in class, because, nobody wants everybody to see them. Not
Correct.
Understand.
Yeah. You definitely get a lot more emails from the online students, that's for sure. One question that I want to get back to the women in leadership kind of thing. Have you seen much, any difficulties that you would find through that? We did a session, this was last October, where everybody that I had on that in the month of October is mostly for breast cancer awareness. We had were CIOs or chief privacy officers or executives that were women in technology, and we talked a little bit about that there. But I kind of wanted to get your take on just any pressures that you've seen, or may have experienced being a president of a university as a woman.
Surely there are some. It's just such a hard job. You don't think about, this is because I'm a woman, or this is because, I'm not. But people do, when there aren't a lot of you. Some folks don't quite know how to respond, and so there have been occasions, where I'll be standing there with a staff member, maybe talking to a member of the legislature, and the legislator is just talking to my staffer, who happens to be a man. And a lot taller than I am, and he's just talking to him, and then he'll ask him a question, and then my staffer will say, "Well, you'll probably have to ask the president." And then he looks around and says, "Oh," it's like you sort of overlooked. They don't expect the person they need to talk to be the woman, and I have never felt like it held me back or held the university back, but it's different. And you have to learn some new rhythms and not take offense, because the whole point is getting the job done. It's not being adored.
Right. So what are some of the challenges that you've seen when it comes to having the right core courses and majors and degrees when it comes to technology programs? Because I know, being a professor, I tell my students, actually, when I'm teaching, one of the courses I teach is kind of like the business of information systems, and I'll tell a lot of them that a lot of the things that you're learning here is going to be outdated by the time you graduate.
That's right.
So what kind of challenges have you seen in that?
Well, I think the challenges is what you outlined: keeping up. The industry is changing very, very fast. and hiring faculty and keeping them up to speed on changes in technology. That requires a professional development opportunities for your faculty, especially if it's traditional tenure line faculty, than others. The history doesn't change a lot hourly. Cybersecurity does.
Yes.
And so you have to really have them schooled up. And that is a big challenge, finding the right people, keeping them tooled up. There's a shelf life. And listening to industry. Our employers will tell us what they need, but we better listen. And universities, this is going to surprise you, don't move real fast. And so, but curriculum needs to change. It needs to change quickly. So that's been, one of the hard things. And we found a lot of good practices to address that. Visiting faculty. Or externships to send our faculty out into industry. But you have to be on top of it, and you have to do it.
So what is that like if a faculty member wants to take like an externship and go out and work, and kind of learn some of the things? I know for me that's been extremely helpful in my teaching. It's the fact that I teach part-time and my day job is leading an IT group, and I can always bring stories and experience in. What does that look like for a faculty member? Do they take like an entire semester off? Is it done during the summer? How does that work?
A little of everything. Sometimes they'll even take a part of the semester. They'll get some teaching release from the semester they're in. They request, time off, or they're invited to do it. I'd like to say, our response is always immediate, and then, oh yes, that's a great idea. The flip side of that is somebody has to teach their classes, and so if they're not here doing that, who's going to be here teaching students? So we do try to have a good stable of adjuncts, and a lot of times fellow faculty will step in and take on a class so that they can be gone. Mm-hmm. It does require an intuitive department chair, and it does require a cooperative dean who gets it, and because all departments are not alike.
Right. Yeah.
And
it's going to be more necessary for some than others, for sure.
It is, and sometimes that's not perceived well by departments where there's not such a demand for a change in the curriculum.
Do you guys have trouble filling some of the adjunct roles when it comes to technology professors? I know at both of the schools that I'm at, it seems like every year they're asking the other adjuncts, do we have people that we work with that also have a master's that can come in and help out and things like that?
I don't think so. Mm-hmm. And there may be more challenge than I'm just aware of. We are lucky here that we are surrounded by lots of folks with the right credentials who really enjoy being around students and working with students. And so we have not had that. University of West Florida is a very desirable place to work. We're sitting right here on the world's most beautiful beaches. And so we have been lucky in recruiting faculty who want to come and stay and make a career here as well.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your Center for Cybersecurity that you guys have established and created there.
That is one of our pride and joys. We started that about 5 years ago. And we had some money that we had received from the state university system for IT, and we could kind of do whatever we liked. And I was thinking, I said, I'm not going to break this up and give 25 cents to one dean and 25 cents to another because I can't do anything big with it. We put together a task force, and they said, it's time. Cybersecurity is what's happening. Let's put together a Center for Cybersecurity. And so we started, and I mean, this is kind of starting from, I don't want to say we didn't know what we were doing, but it was all new, and found the right leadership, drafted one of our computer science faculty who is just a ball of energy. We realized that we had to get our CAE designation, our NSA CAE designation, got it in record time, and then we just took off. We're now one of the 8 regional hubs designated by the NSA, regional education hubs, and we coordinate the education among the entire Southeast.
Wow.
And that says a lot about doing the right thing. We also realized that there were a lot of different directions we could take the program, and probably every single one of them would be right. But we really have formed a niche in workforce. We have spent a lot of time retooling, upskilling existing workforce. We do work for the state of Florida to upskill state employees because the state realized we can't just keep going out and raiding the next state over for cyber workers. It's time we grew our own. We work with elections supervisors to ensure the integrity of the elections, which is, a big deal. And so we found that niche. We work with the Secretary of State and continue to do a lot of projects like that. In addition to training students, we have degrees in cybersecurity, lots of certificates. Right now, that's what I'm hearing more and more about. And so one of the advantages of our university, University of West Florida, is one of the 12 in the state university system in Florida. We are not the largest. We are not the oldest. We're about 52 years old. We are by far not the richest, but we are the most agile. And we can turn on a dime. And right now, being able to do that and having a cybersecurity program, there's some magic there.
I definitely want to get into more details on the cybersecurity program in just a minute. But you mentioned that you guys are an agile organization, which is, being in the higher ed field myself, that's kind of a rarity. I've been teaching for 14 years, and some things take a while to change. How have you instilled that idea of transformation and being agile among other faculty?
I think that some of it has just been part of the culture. We are, again, we're not, we're here on the westernmost point of Florida. We're right on the Gulf of Mexico, almost at the Alabama line, if you know the shape of Florida. Mm-hmm. And we're in a whole different time zone than everybody else in the state. And so we call ourselves Fort Apache, and we're over here by ourselves, and so there is a pioneer spirit here, a frontier spirit that's always been here, because a lot of times we just sort of have to figure things out for ourselves because we're in the other time zone. And so I think some of it's inherent, some of it's just a matter of timing. I think the university has matured like companies do and like people do, and we're just at a good point in our development. The spirit of the campus is good. We have great leadership up and down, really spending a lot of time cultivating emerging leadership. Most of us want to go sit down sooner or later, but we want to make sure the place is in good hands. So I can pick up the phone today, right now, and in an hour have the leadership in my office, and I can say, all right, here's our challenge, or here's what we need to be doing, and we can make a decision, and we go. We don't always agree, but our differences are more tactical mm-hmm. and not ideological. There is a lot of trust. That doesn't happen everywhere. But it's something that we do work to preserve.
Yeah, trust is usually a hard thing to build, but I always say trust takes transparency, and once you get there, by being open and being able to have everybody in your office and having the same vision and the same strategy, and just the tactics may be a little bit different, you understand and trust each other.
Well, and it makes all the difference. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't attend every single department meeting. But, at least in my meetings, I'll say, now, y'all feel free to jump right in, because I don't even pretend to have all the answers.
Yeah.
And so, and it also takes some confidence. Yeah. I have confidence in them, and, it's okay if I'm wrong.
Yeah. You mentioned that in the cybersecurity center that you're getting a lot of certificates and things that people are going after there. Is that more from people that have gone out and started a career somewhere and lost their jobs, or they're interested in changing up? Because I know I've had Dave Bittner on the show from the CyberWire, and he and I both always regularly get this question of, how do I get into cybersecurity? What is the path I take? How do I switch my career and move that way? Have you seen that kind of growth with your students?
We do. We also, our part of Florida, there's a heavy military presence. And so often we'll have people coming out with lots of different credentials, and they'll just need one more to be ready for that workforce. And so it's a mix of everything. Or even a student who is a recent graduate that says, now I've worked a year or two in the workforce, and now I really want to come back and explore this opportunity. One of the things I'd love to do that we're discussing is having like cybersecurity learning communities in our residence halls. Our program is also multidisciplinary. It's not just computer science. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of criminal justice, political science. There are a lot of areas for which cybersecurity is of a keen interest. And so wouldn't it be great if every student, whatever their major, were to come out of school with at least an awareness. This company I'm going into, whether they're going to be newspaper reporters or whatever, here are some of the cyber challenges that they're going to use. And it's not all about just business. And it's not all about data hacking. There are just all kinds of challenges, that, as you know, that are going to be facing them. So I'm really hoping to be able to create that awareness in every student, whichever direction they go.
Yeah, that almost sounds like something that should be taught kind of like as a 1-hour course to everybody, Yeah.
These days, you're exactly right.
Yeah, I know when I was a freshman at Winthrop, we had a course called CISM, which I think only lasted for like two semesters and it went away. And I forgot what it stood for now, but it was basically like teaching freshmen how to understand the life of being at college. I mean, we didn't have Ethernet back then at our school. We had to dial in, if you needed to connect online. So cybersecurity wasn't a thing like it is today. But yeah, I definitely see that people don't understand what they're giving up when they check that accept, and what kind of privacy and things they put out there, and what the implication is of once they put something online, the fact that you really can't pull that back.
Some of our students in the Cybersecurity Center, we have cybersecurity ambassadors, and they do all kinds of cool stuff. They go into the public schools and talk to kids, but every now and then we'll bring them in if we're having a meeting of VIPs or whatever, and they'll hack into their phones, and it's just such great fun. But they'll show them, or they don't really, but they'll show them how vulnerable they are sitting in that very room. Yeah, and it can be pretty sobering.
It's very eye-opening. I remember the first time that I actually had we did a penetration test at my current company, and the guy walked in, and he introduced himself, shook my hand, and we walked into our conference room, and then he pulled out this little blue thing out of his pocket and says, "By the way, I copied your badge when you walked by," and he said, "Why don't you try this and see if you can get in and out of places?" And I was just blown away that he now had access to the whole place.
Well, and that kind of awareness is important. I think we're at a point now where we really need to do more public communication campaigns and make people. It's a hard thing to get people to really think about until something awful happens. I think we kind of get now protecting our Social Security numbers, and we kind of understand identity theft. But there are so many other vulnerabilities we can inadvertently introduce into our own lives that not everybody understands.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So when you hear something like what recently happened with Capital One or with the Equifax breach a few years ago, do you see like an uptick in students coming in at that time, or is there no really relationship?
Well, I didn't notice, but I wasn't looking at the trend either. But I suspect I have had a lot of students whose parents are coming in and saying he needs to go into cybersecurity. So I think that awareness plus we know how many jobs there are out there.
Absolutely.
And there are tons.
Absolutely. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, so I'm surrounded by, Bank of America's headquarters and Wells Fargo's headquarters, and I think the SunTrust merger, they're relocating here as well. So there's banks all around, and I was talking to a recruiter not too terribly long ago, it's probably been a few months ago now, about the cybersecurity area in Charlotte, and they were telling me that there's a negative unemployment rate right now. Yeah. They have significantly more openings than they have people looking.
Well, we know just in our region, the 8 counties that we call Northwest Florida, last count about 1,100 vacancies, and we're filling them as fast as we can.
Wow. Do you see students more eagerly moving into technology? I know that's one thing that I was kind of surprised of being at Winthrop, is that although we do have a really good computer science program, the numbers seem to be steady. They're not really increasing at the rate that I would think so, because I see the job openings increasing, but the rate of students aren't quite matching that. Students
overall in STEM are really up, so in technology in particular, they're up. Around here, we also have strong career academies, so they're cultivated younger and brought in. Some of that is also because we actively recruit them. So it's a little hard to say, are we working with a clean slate, or are we simply going after students who will be drawn to technology?
Yeah. So tell me what. When you guys were building this cybersecurity program, and you mentioned that you got a faculty that was really eager, and he kind of you gave him freedom to kind of run with it and reach out. What kind of organizations other than the NSA did you guys reach out to, maybe to help develop the curriculum or figure out what the needs were from the community?
Well, certainly she can tell you better. We have a number of businesses in town that have been keenly interested. She talked with them. We have Homeland Security, and then strong. Corey Station is here, and that is where the Navy trains its IT and cyber people. So we partnered up with them as well. Some of our faculty actually teach for them, and vice versa. So we had some good connections as well. And then we just started listening, and again, the agility helps. And we have been able to, when we hear something, we'll say, well, let's see if let's try that. And we're quick to say, well, that didn't work. And but so far, that almost the scary thing is almost everything we've tried has been the right thing.
Yeah, wow, that's excellent. And I like the fact that you have the courage to say, yep, that didn't work. Let's change gears. Let's switch focus. Because I've seen it a lot in higher education where we rolled out a program and it's kind of like, well, we probably should do this a little differently. I said, well, no, we need to let it run for a couple of years and see, Well,
and as president, I see that a lot. Too often we see things that, you try it once and then it just got cemented into the curriculum. We try things. I like to it's going to take usually take 3 years for anything to really develop as far as academic programming. But I always write a sunset clause. And that's what I would advise any president to do. And just say, all right, here are the thresholds that we would expect as this program develops. If it doesn't meet the threshold at some given time, here is how we're going to dismantle it. And it really helps if you think that far, like what will happen to the faculty member, what will happen to the facility or whatever you're using, and say we're going to fold it in or we're going to cut it loose. But if you say it on the front end, it solves a whole lot of distress if it doesn't work.
Yeah. It sounds like that makes it a little bit easier to make that decision, but also it makes it less fearful for the people that are working in it because they kind of know what to expect and how to plan for it.
Yes, and they tend to be motivated to meet those thresholds.
There was another thing that was sent along with your bio that talked about the C3D lab as kind of a modeling for integration. What is that?
C3D lab is a lab where it's additive manufacturing with lots of gizmos that build prototypes for for various reasons. We've had a number of folks from local industries have come in. One from a multi-million-dollar industry locally, and there was a piece of machinery that was broken and they couldn't replace it. And so our students in the C3D lab recreated it for them out of a much better material. And one of the things I think is really interesting is that lab is attended by engineering students and art students. I mean, it is a true STEAM experience, and so it's a service to the community, and it certainly enables our students to go and test out some of their models as well. And it's one that we're expanding now for Makerspace. For our faculty are just itching to do that, and to teach something well, you gotta be able to build it and demonstrate it. So C3D Lab is one of those. It is for the campus. It is also for the community.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a partnership from York Technical College here with a company called 3D Systems, and they do a lot of that same kind of thing where they model things. I remember going and doing a tour of them when they first came in, and they had this thing where they put my hand in this little 3D scanner, and then it printed a copy of my hand. When I grabbed the printed thing, you could see my fingerprints. It was like so detailed, and I was just blown away that technology existed, and that was several years ago.
Well, and they do, again, they do a lot of good. And and it's just sort of cool to see the kinds of students that go in there and work it. And we had a man in the community that lived in an old house. And, and down here we have a lot of those jalousie windows, those little skinny windows that you crank open. Mm-hmm. And something broke. And he didn't want to have all his windows replaced. And so he comes and he says, can you all make one of these so that I can open my windows? And they did. And so it's very gratifying to see what they can do. Plus, it gives students wonderful resume additives because they've done stuff.
I've always thought the line between art and engineering was actually a lot closer than a lot of schools, and even people may seem that they are, because they'll say, "Oh, I'm not creative, I'm an engineer." Well, you're kind of pretty creative to be an engineer.
Well, you are, and I think there never has been a gap. I think we've only just now it was artificially enforced probably by academics, college presidents, who wanted some kind of orderly organization of their units.
So one last question that I want to ask a little bit about: how would you recommend to someone who maybe whether they're in any field doesn't really matter, but they're interested in becoming more of a leader? What have you seen along your career that may help them develop some of their leadership skills?
Well, watch, learn. You can learn from bad leaders. You can learn from good leaders, and there's always that. Well, I'll never do that, or. But I think it is key to learn your industry, not just your job. That's important to be able to do your job, but know your industry. Know what worries the person at the top of the heap has, because it's going to be a lot more than yours. And the more you understand the industry either you're going into as a new student or that you're into. When I was a young faculty member, I'm just curious. And so I would volunteer to get on committees that didn't have anything to do with faculty world. And I remember one that was just probably the most painful. I had volunteered. We were building a new dorm, and I volunteered to be on the committee that would select the builder. It was a bid process. And so I walked in the first day, and there was a book in front of me about the size of 2 New York telephone books. This big giant book. And so the chair of the committee said, "All right, page 1." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they have to read all this, and it's just terrible. But I learned how to build a dormitory and all the things to think about it. And that's something I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't volunteered to do that. I think the other thing, and I would say this to anybody in any field, adapt, 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 adapt. the way it was yesterday is not the way it is today. And the way you've always done it has gotten you to this point. And if you're perfectly happy here, then stop. But probably the best thing to do is learn to change and adapt and swivel until move on to the next thing.
Yep.
It's all part of the adventure.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. There's a really good book that says what got you here won't get you there. That kind of hits on a lot of that point. And also, when you talk about learning your industry, not just your job, that's one thing that I found was very difficult for me when I first got into technology, because I assumed that technology is technology. Every group has software developers. Every group, has IT people. But then what I realized is once I learned the industry, I could offer solutions that the other people weren't asking for, because I knew the technology could create those solutions. And
that makes you priceless.
Yes, makes you a lot more valuable.
It absolutely does. And we should talk.
Well, I think this has been a great conversation. You're an excellent storyteller, and I loved having you on, and I love to hear what you guys are doing with cybersecurity, because it's just like a breath of fresh air to hear that, because you see so many people that are interested in getting started, and sometimes it's difficult for them to find a place that they can get that information.
Well, thank you. Come see us.
Yeah. So how can people? What's the URL, the website they can go to find out and learn more?
UWF.edu.
Man, that is simple. I'll link that up in the show notes, and people can find that at ageekleader.com, and they can go right over to it, or they can just go to uwf.edu. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with President Saunders, and hopefully you guys will go to the University of West Florida and check out some of the programs they have, especially if you're in the area or if you're interested in cybersecurity. Definitely a good resource for how to get started and learning more about cybersecurity. Well, I wanted to talk about reviews. I want you guys to leave me a rating or review. That'd be awesome. It helped the show grow. The show has grown substantially over the last, let's say, year and a half. We really started picking up about the last year more than anything else. And I think part of that is because people are sharing it with their friends. People are finding it. And one of the ways that people find it is going to their podcast player, whether it be Overcast or CastBox or Google Play or Spotify or iHeartRadio or Apple Podcast, and searching. And some of those podcast players help rank these shows based on how you guys are reviewing and rating it. So if you don't mind, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and review there. That's one of the places where we get the most downloads is through Apple Podcasts. And the second highest is through Overcast Player. And one thing I noticed on the Overcast Player, if you go to the episode, you can click the little star button or tap on the star with your finger, and that helps to boost the show a little bit more. We've had lots of stars, I can tell. So please go do that. And I wanted to read a review real quick from one of our listeners. This is one of my favorite reviews, and this is from Wahid Tanner, and it says, John and a Geek Leader podcast have had a meaningful and positive impact on my life. I wanted to let John know that his message does have a butterfly effect that gets bigger over time. Thank you. So that was a 5-star review. I really appreciate that. Please keep the reviews coming. They help motivate me to keep the show going and keep doing this thing, because I do this for fun. I don't do this for money. I don't do this for any other reason than to help benefit others and leadership, and to help myself, to help learn more by talking to experts and learning from them as well. So all the things that you guys are learning and picking up from here, I'm learning as well. It's a great journey. I really appreciate it. So please leave a rating review, share this episode or any other episode with your friends. I would be greatly appreciated. And with all that being said, have a great week.